Okay, aloha, welcome to the South Kohala Coastal Partnership Speaker Series. My name is Blair Langston, I'm with the Nature Conservancy. Before we get started with our presentation today, I'd like to give a quick overview of the Coastal Partnership and how today's presentation fits within the context of the network for folks who might not be so familiar with us yet. Why we focus on South Kohala. Hawaii Island is a pretty big island. You might be wondering why do we focus on the South Kohala region? There's a little bit of history there. In 2010, our State Division of Aquatic Resources Hawaii Coral Reef Strategy actually named the area a priority area due to its substantially important coral reef ecosystems. So the state saw an opportunity to get an interdisciplinary team of folks to work together on the wide range of anthropogenic stressors that affect the reefs locally, to work together in partnership on those issues from Mauka to Makai. So with that, we started the South Kohala Coastal Partnership. We have over 70 members in the network, and this includes groups such as various community groups, government agencies, nonprofit organizations, various businesses, researchers, resource managers, and landowners too. Our collective vision as a partnership is a restored, healthy, abundant, resilient South Kohala coastal system, cared for and cherished by an island community, guided by the values and traditions of South Kohala. So the partnership has gone through an iterative planning processes over the course of its existence, which has led to the development of conservation action plans. In the most recent conservation action plan, we have identified 6 key strategies, which each has a team lead and a working group. And these are resilient ocean policy, which focuses on community-based fisheries management, soil and watershed management, which focuses on preventing sedimentation onto the reefs caused by erosion and exacerbated by wildfire. Clean water management focused on groundwater contaminants, including sewage and sediment washing onto the reef. County and community planning, connecting with our local county department and seeing how we can guide their efforts with conservation science. Community connectivity and stewardship focused on place-based connections, outreach and education. And last but not least, our climate smart threat assessment and response focused on staying up to date on the most recent climate change science and data available that may affect the region. So with that, we are continuing our speaker series. I pasted the link in the chat to our website of our previous videos. This presentation is being recorded and will be available up on the website afterwards. A few housekeeping items. Please keep yourself on mute during the presentation. And afterwards, we will open up to question and answer and discussion. Feel free to put any burning questions in the chat and I'll help keep track of those. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Elizabeth Pickett and Nani Barreto from Hawaii Wildfire Management Organization with their presentation today.
Great, thank you, Blair. Yeah, thank you. So Nani's going to be helping us by going through the slideshow and going through the slides while I present. So thank you, Nani, for doing that. We're ready to get started. So thank you again for joining today, for being interested in this part 2 of a wildfire series that we've developed in partnership with the South Kohala Coastal Partnership. And today is focused on what we can do to protect communities and natural resources from wildfire. And to frame that a little bit, I just wanted to share that Hawaii Wildfire You can go back, Nani, it's okay. Hawaii Wildfire has been working with several partners across the state, including Dr. Clay Trauernicht at UH, who presented last month with a lot of fire-related data and research, and lots of other additional partners. And we've been working hard over the last 20 years, actually, as an organization to produce information and move forward with wildfire-related research programs and initiatives. And over time, we've connected with and moved forward on programming with communities, with land managers, with researchers and professionals in many fields across the state and region, and even partners on the mainland, across the Western Pacific, and more. And over that time, we've learned a lot about how to frame the wildfire situation in Hawaii and how best we can think it through in order to address it. And that's what I'm going to be sharing today. So now we can dive right in. And this is really the framing of Hawaii wildfire situation from more of like the statistics and the research, looking at trends and patterns. And now Clay went through this in much greater detail at last month's presentation, which Blair recorded and is on that link that she provided. So I'm just going to go through it very quickly today so that if you didn't attend that last month, you can have some of that same starting point. So the important thing to note is that what we see in terms of wildfire is a direct result of what is happening when it comes to people, climate, and vegetation. And in Hawaii, we have an increase in drought episodes. We have increasing fire fuels because of the expansion of non-native fire-prone grasslands. And that expands with each fire. And we have increases in human-caused ignitions. And so after collecting the records from all 8 fire agencies across the state and analyzing them and tracking and researching fire fuels and wildland hazards, we know that a whole lot of ignitions are accidental. And you can see that blue bar across the top. The primary causes of accidental ignitions are campfires, arcing, sparking equipment from welders and grinders, and personal equipment all the way through our aging electrical grid and power infrastructure. We also have accidental ignitions, a lot of them by vehicles pulling over on dry grass or traffic accidents, and also fireworks. And we also know on the vegetation side that over 26% of our state at this point is covered in invasive fire-prone grasses, and they're highly ignitable, highly combustible, and a lot of it is unmanaged and all connected to each other, allowing fire to spread very quickly. And then now when you look at this graph, you can see that the setup of ignitions and fuels is really important and has an impact on our fire situation and acres burned. So if you look at the map itself, at the graph itself, you can see that the light gray bars are the number of ignitions per island. And then in the dark bars, you can see the number of acres burned. And so on Oahu, where population is highest, the ignitions that require suppression response are off the charts, but the acres burned, the number of acres burned, are lower because of the limited size of the land area and the capacity of the fire agencies to quickly suppress. And conversely, on Hawaii Island and Maui and Lanai, there's less population, a little bit less firefighting capacity, and fewer ignitions, but the fires carry much farther and burn a lot more acreage. And so what we see in terms of the fire issues is related to people and fuels on the ground. And then after mapping 12 years of fire ignitions based on the records of all 8 agencies, we were able to pull out some important patterns. So ignitions are happening on all sides of all islands. Now the fires get big where it is dry, but the important note here is that we're seeing an increase in drought episodes, and the drying of vegetation on windward sides does happen. So under the right conditions, really anywhere can burn. And we do already have ignitions happening in those areas. So we expect that wildfire will increasingly be of concern in all areas on all islands. But of course, the leeward sides have the greatest year-round, year-to-year fire risk. You can also see from this map that the majority of fires occur along roads and human access areas, and only 1% of fires are caused by lava or lightning, and the rest are by people. So shifting the culture and behaviors around fire is of the utmost importance so that people are making wildfire aware decisions instead of thinking wildfire is just random and happenstance. It's really actually caused by a lot of our accidents and mismanagement or undermanagement of our vegetation. So in case you haven't seen this before, we like to encourage everyone to think about wildfire using this equation. And really, it's where we have a high number of human-caused ignitions, and they happen in areas with dense, unmanaged vegetation. We have a recipe for wildfires, which impact natural resources, communities, and infrastructure, and firefighter and public lives and safety. So on the bottom left there, that's actually a Malka forest burning. The middle picture on the bottom is Waikoloa Village, where that black area is all fire that burned right up to the edge of the community. And of course, you know, our firefighters putting out a fire. And so what are all the things we need to do about that? We need to reduce the causes, and that is reducing ignitions and reducing fuels. And we also need to prepare and protect our natural resources, our communities, and we need to optimize firefighting to keep everybody safe and to quickly suppress fires. Now, some important additional thoughts as we think about that equation in the future are that drought exacerbates those risks and impacts of fire. And you can see here that the projected areas of increased drought are expanding to new regions across all islands, and fire is related to that. And one more thing is that the declining agriculture and changes in land use also contribute to the problem. So you can see in the graph here that when the fields were taken out, have been taken out of active production and they're let to go fallow, wildfires have really started increasing in size and frequency, and in some cases by as much as 300%. So there's a lot more that we have been able to unpack, especially with a lot of the work that Clay Trowernick has done. And so he gave a lot of that in-depth information related to these things I've shown so far in last month's presentation. So I encourage you to watch that if you haven't. But for today, that's a really good start for you to be able to share with others what you need in order to make the case that wildfires are an essential and constant issue to be aware of and to be addressed. But we want to talk about today how we can actually address them both comprehensively and sustainably, since the goal is actually to make a difference and be more effective in our actions. So the first critical shift in culture is to unwind the myth that our fire departments are the only ones who have anything to do when it comes to preparing for or dealing with wildfire. In order to shift to a norm in Hawaii, where people are actively taking responsibility, preparing, planning, reducing risks around their homes and communities, and not accidentally starting fires, it's really essential to underline the fact that firefighting is the very last line of defense. If we are at this stage of firefighting, we missed every opportunity to prevent and thwart fire's ability to ignite and spread. And really, we know that we'll never have zero fires, but we can make things a lot better by working ahead of time on the many hazards that we can control. So that's the starting point. But there is still a lot more that needs to be done and can be done. And a great way to think it through is to use the National Cohesive Wildland Fire Management Strategy. They have organized things into these categories and goals per category. And these goals pertain to all regions across the US, but we've worked together to fine tune them for Hawaii specifically. And then that's what I'm going to share with you now. So that all of us can be working with this sort of comprehensive framework of all the stuff that needs to happen toward fire. So first, there's a communities part, which is in the cohesive strategy framework, it's called fire adapted communities. And a way to think about that is just communities that are adapted to the wildfire threat, which is what we are all aiming for. And this part includes people and the built environment. And let's see, so to get to a place where communities are adapted to the reality that wildfire is a permanent issue, we need to make sure that everyone understands that it's really up to everyone to prevent ignitions and that there's a role for everyone to play. And we all have specific actions we can take to become more fire ready and resilient. So on that note, that idea that there's a role for all of us to play, you can see in this graphic here, it was made by the Fire Adapted Communities Network, that we really need all of us to know and advocate for our community leaders and elected officials to be working toward budgets and policies that meet our wildland fire needs. We need developers and planners to make sure that our areas are fire-wise from the start. Just so you know, at this point, 2/3 of our communities only have one ingress and egress. We don't have defensible space around our communities that allows for firefighting access around the perimeters. And we have lots of neighborhoods that don't have easily accessed water for firefighting. So this is where it's really essential that we're working with developers and planners, planning department, et cetera, and thinking about wildfire and building it into our designs in the first place. We also need our land managers strategically reducing fuels, making sure there's access, they're stabilizing soils after there are fires to minimize flooding, they're preparing their vegetation ahead of time to reduce fire spread. We need residents taking actions around their homes and yards, knowing that fires often start not just from a flaming fire front, but from embers blowing in the wind. We want to make sure that when those embers land, they're not going to land in something that can ignite and start spreading through our communities. And then all of that is in addition to the first responders that we so often think of and associate with fire. So it's really important that we all start talking about it in this way and understanding that we all have a responsibility in addressing wildfire. And together, comprehensively, we can actually make a lot of progress. So now here are the actual cohesive strategy goals for fire adapted communities in Hawaii. And I do want to note that all of our state's community wildfire protection plans organize the hazards and the goals and all the community input and next step priorities according to the National Cohesive Strategy framework and goals. So if you end up picking up one of those reports or plans for your area, it'll be organized in this way as well. Okay, so number one is to prepare your home, yard, and family for wildfire. And we'll cover these more deeply in a minute, but you can just know that we have solid resources for everyone so that they can move forward in this kind of action. The second, number two, is to work within your neighborhood and community to learn more about wildfire and to take action collectively together. And again, the best program that we have in the state available to support this type of work is through the FireWise Hawaii Network or FireWise Communities, and we'll cover that part in detail in a little bit too. But that's just, an important thing to know is we're making these recommendations, but also we have programming and opportunities to support each of these points. Number three is we need to be aware of and all working together to make sure that we've protected our community and municipal infrastructure like roads, power, cell towers, et cetera. And this is a key point because we also want to empower our community leaders and decision makers and private businesses to plan for fire ahead of time to reduce the risk to this infrastructure and to protect it adequately and to make sure that infrastructure also isn't contributing to the fire risk. And then finally, number four, but this one's really important, we need to advocate for wildfire policy, planning, mitigation funding, and really support the people, groups, and others who are working on wildfire because it's an underfunded, underpublicized, underaddressed issue, and there's a lot to do. And we need actions, we need laws and budgets, all of that to catch up with our increased fire issue that we're facing in Hawaii. And okay, so that wraps up the communities part. And if you recall, there were three categories in the cohesive strategy. So the second part is the landscape part. We'll spend a few minutes on that and what needs to happen to achieve fire resilient landscapes. The important points here are that in Hawaii, we have another list and the things we need to do. The first is that we need to protect sensitive areas. So I think you can go on to the next, there we go. And we are the endangered species capital of the world, and our landscapes are our cultural, recreational, spiritual, and economic sustenance. They provide our food and water, and fire significantly impacts them. So natural resources are critical to protect in addition to life and property, which is typically the charge of our fire agencies. Second, we need to manage vegetation sustainably for the long term. So this can range from grazing corridors to reactivating agriculture. But the idea here is that thinking we'd ever be able to weed whack our entire 1 million acres over and over at that landscape scale across the state and across hard to access areas it's pretty impractical. So we need to collectively come up with and implement creative, effective, and long-term solutions for managing our vegetation. And we need the widespread support and policy and funding to make that happen, and the infrastructure in place to do it. And we need to support and encourage our large landowners and land managers to do their pre-fire planning and to work on fire fuels vegetation management. Third, we need in our larger land areas, we need to limit access during high risk conditions. And toward this, there's a lot of work going on to improve our statewide real-time location-specific fire danger rating system. And I think Clay talked about that, and it's an ongoing process. And that's really needed, and we're excited about that. But even once we have that information, we need to build the knowledge and capacity of land managers to manage lands accordingly. And we need all of our friends and family and community members and the public to understand why that's for the greater good, and that it's for the protection of our resources and people from fire. And finally, we need to increase our fire science research and modeling, because that's really going to help us make sound land management decisions as our fuels are spreading, our climate is changing, et cetera. And we are doing that via the Pacific Fire Exchange program that Hawaii Wildfire and University of Hawaii and Forest Service are co-leading. But there is more to do and more capacity that's needed to keep building our Hawaii specific knowledge. And what we've done is really good so far, but it is actually far less than what other mainland regions have in terms of their modeling and research related to fire. So Hawaii, again, is trying to catch up to the size of our issue. And we want to also note here that there is a big role that land managers can play in making sure that firefighters have the access and water on large land areas to support firefighting operations if it comes to that. And then when we think about resilient landscapes and how fire travels across them and how it impacts them, we look at this triangle here, and we call it the fire behavior triangle. And this is where topography, climate, and vegetation or fuel all play a huge role in what happens when fire is burning across the landscape. And we point this out because we want to show you, it's in orange there, that the one thing that we actually can do something about is fuel. And so we real quick just wanted to showcase all the ways that partners across Hawaii are managing fuel loads on their lands with differing impacts. So there are many ways to reduce fuel. Mowing is one, hand weeding. I think these slides just click through, Nani. Hand weeding, herbicide, sometimes aerial and other spraying, and sometimes strategic grazing. And we've researched and learned a lot, and we have a lot of resources about what best methods and best practices are for each of those. And a lot of it boils down to what makes sense per location, what can be done, budgets, who's doing it, and how much maintenance is available. And so this kind of work can range from neighborhood chipper days and landscaping parties within communities to large scale grazing, to grazing corridors done through collaborative cross-boundary efforts. Like this here is happening in Waianae and right here. So we have actually like a community group that's all come together to figure out how to support their farmers to use grazing as a tool to manage their fire risk. And so there's a lot of ways to get it done, all the way to conventional weed whacked fuel breaks like you see here. And so now finally, that third category in the cohesive strategy is focused on firefighting, because while we said it's the last line of defense, it's also crucial that our firefighters have everything in place that they need. And so there are goals for optimizing our response to fire events by ensuring safe and effective firefighting, which is the third component here. And so those three key actions identified that optimize firefighting are really focused toward keeping fires small and quickly contained and keeping the public and firefighters safe. So we need to improve access and water. We need to ensure up-to-date training and equipment for our fire agencies. And this spans wildland fire specific certifications and next level learning and refreshers, as well as making sure communications and mutual aid agreements and coordination among our agencies are all optimized, prioritized, and practiced. And finally, we need fire management plans that include pre-fire mitigation, suppression, and post-fire stabilization and recovery. We need to think through the entire timeline of fire planning and make sure we're really getting everything in place that's needed. And then finally, the fourth goal is for the firefighting effort itself to use minimal impact suppression techniques so that the landscape, archaeological sites, threatened and endangered species, and highly erodible areas don't suffer from the firefighting effort itself or once the fire is over. And so this is a key goal for Hawaii because the fire itself and the dozer lines can often lead to increased erosion that flows downhill during storm events and smothers coral reefs. And that impacts, and Blair pointed to this earlier, but it impacts water quality, fisheries, and also leaves the landscape in a situation that is harder to stabilize and rehabilitate and plant after the fire. So this is where land managers can help by doing that pre-fire planning and ensuring adequate water and access for firefighters and working ahead of time with our fire agencies so that fires that do occur can be quickly suppressed and kept small and minimize damages. And so we have a series of slides here, like what does it look like when all three categories are being addressed? I didn't point out earlier, but you can see that science is in the center of that because the idea is that our best available science is informing the actions in each of these categories. But what will it look like when we have fire adapted communities, resilient landscapes, and safe and effective optimized firefighting response, and when all of it is informed by the best available science? Here's what it looks like. It looks like we are managing our pre-fire hazards like ignitions and fuel. We are diminishing our risks to natural resources. It means during suppression, firefighters have what they need and are able to prevent damage to sensitive resources and to communities and the built environment. It means that after fire, we are recovering, we are rehabilitating, we are restoring burned areas, and we are including all the stakeholders and all the actions that need to come together. And so that includes this list here. So community planning, natural resource management, zoning, budgets for pre, during, and after fire actions. It means we have wildfire related policies, we have unified messaging so people really understand what we all need to be doing pre, during, and after fire. We have good research and data going on related to wildland fire, and ultimately that we're all collaborating. And we've really thought through and taken action at the policy. And what it means is that we have thought through and that we're taking action at the policy and planning levels to make sure that we are dealing with that intersection of where the human and the built environment kind of come together. And that and those places include subdivision design, landscaping standards, building codes that include wildland factors. That's the being firewise from the start part. Infrastructure planning, forest and natural area management, and even things like steep slope ordinances, because those have to do with preventing post-fire erosion and controlling erosion and stabilizing soils pre, during, and after fire. And so the fun part here is Hawaii Wildfire and many of our partners have come together to develop a lot of resources. And we have a lot of resources and opportunities available to help us get toward that vision of wildfire ready and wildfire resilient. And we want to point out that we have both educational resources so that people can learn, but we also have action programs so that the actual risk reduction and resilience can happen. So there's like the learning part, education, and then there's like action opportunities. And I'll go through both of those right here. So we'll start with the educational resources. So Hawaii Wildfire has a lot of general wildfire information, maps, research results. We have statewide and community specific hazard assessments and more. We have technical and peer reviewed scientific publications about fire in Hawaii and the Pacific, and that we and many of our partners have published. We have some easy to read articles in Fire Management Today and other fire publications, and we have a lot more that may be of use or interest. There are regional fire plans, community wildfire protection plans. We have done a huge effort to map hazardous fuels and to plan for fuels management. We have lots of planning documents. Let's see, next slide. We have some resources we shared already, which include our public outreach and general education guides and fact sheets, as well as we also have youth activities and classroom curricula. And then we wanted to make sure that you know about a program that Hawaii Wildfire and UH are leading together with the Forest Service and several other partners to make sure that the research arm of wildfire science in Hawaii stays strong, and that we have best available information always accessible and available to emergency responders, land managers, and the public. It's called the Pacific Fire Exchange. And like I said, it's a collaborative program that we're all working on. So if you see something come your way from the Pacific Fire Exchange, you can know that that's our fire science arm hard at work. And we could probably pop this into the chat, but at pacificfireexchange.org, we have a lot of additional resources and information available. So it's certainly worth your time to check it out. And then one fun thing we have to share is Kaleo the Pueo. He's Hawaii's wildfire mascot. We have posters, stickers. We now have a costume. He's friends with Smokey, don't worry. But he does offer a more relevant image and message than maybe the fire adapted pine trees and conifers of the Western US landscape that are most associated with Smokey Bear. And then if there's anything you dive into right away or share with others, it's going to be these foundational resources. And I said I'd go into more depth. So here we are. The Ready, Set, Go Hawaii Action Guide is the Hawaii version of the national program. And this covers fire causes and impacts in Hawaii. It goes through very detailed step-by-step preparedness actions that you can take around your home and with your family. And your yard, and it provides information on what to do during a fire event and in case of evacuation. And if you don't ever look at it, please just remember that it's best to leave well ahead of an evacuation order. And you can do so with the peace of knowing your home and yard is ready if you've adequately prepared it. And this action guide sets you up for all of that. So it's a really good resource. Your second, and we have it available digitally, and we have lots of paper copies. So you can get those from hawaiiwildfire.org. Your second super important resource is the Wildfire and Drought Lookout package of materials. Most useful will be the single page fact sheet, but it's a series of tips that were put forward and endorsed by over 35 entities and all our fire agencies across Hawaii. And it's related to preventing accidental ignitions and preparing your home, yard, and community for wildfire. And all of these resources all jive with each other. They just come in different formats. And then finally, the primary residential action program that goes beyond awareness and education and all moves through hazard assessments and sustained community engagement and risk reduction is the Firewise USA program, the Hawaii branch. So Hawaii Wildfire hosts this program for the state in partnership with the national entity, which is NFPA, and with State Forestry and Wildlife. So to date, we have 15 communities that are already nationally recognized and are keeping that up. And in 2020 alone, you can see here, we worked with over 66 community leaders. We had over 13,000 residents engaged. We have the collective protected more than 5,000 homes. We got rid of 4,000 cubic yards of fuel. We had tons of volunteer time and money that were put in to support community risk reduction. So if you are living somewhere that isn't already part of this program and you're interested in getting involved or learning more, please let us know, because it's a really strong program that gets people and place a lot better prepared and protected. So we like to support your efforts in doing that. So make sure you contact us if you want that. And we have several new communities diving in this year toward Firewise recognition. And just to let you know, it usually starts with just a small group of neighbors. And then over time, it grows to, the whole community. And it starts off with a hazard assessment, and then we do some project planning together and just start moving forward on some action. And it's usually pretty fun too. And then this program, it's really having a huge impact, and it's grown to support also not just individual communities, but we have Hawaii Wildfire has made a network so that it's really now a community of communities. And everybody comes together for quarterly gatherings and learning. We do put on lots of workshops, and there's also lots of peer learning and support among all the participants in the program, across islands even. So it's really fun, it's impactful, it gets a lot of risk reduction done. And then in moving forward, you know, with the rest of our presentation here, we just wanted to make sure that you know that there's one last really kind of important thing that happened that we can build off of, in addition to all the things we've already shared. And so I'll talk about that for a minute here, which is that in 2018 and 2019, Hawaii Wildfire, UH, and DOFA all came together to carry out a big project across the state with all the largest landowners on every island. We mapped out what fuels reduction work was already going on, and together we identified the next step priorities for fuels reduction for every area across the state. And then we took that to all of our fire agencies and land managers and collectively determined, well, with limited budgets and limited capacity, where are the priority areas? What do we do first? How can we do it together? And then it yielded, you know, some pretty comprehensive information. If you go back, Nani, I can point out real quick that there's these really big reports you can see on the left there that are available in the comprehensive format per island and also statewide. And then if you go to the next slide, we also made these 2-page summaries as a starting point for fuels management work with large landowners and land managers. And that really laid the groundwork for this other kind of cutting edge, exciting thing that's going on in the state, which is we have collaborative groups working on dealing with fuels. And we have many of these now popping up across the state. And we're hosting them regularly for project planning and collaborative discussions. And they're based on that fuels management mapping and work that we did. And this is really what we see as the future in terms of reducing risks in a multi-partner way across boundaries, across jurisdictions, across property lines, so that it involves everyone it needs to, and that the fuels management work actually makes sense across the landscape. To address real fire behavior as it travels, and rather than each project happening per property, kind of unrelated to each other, because that's not how fire really operates. And so our mitigation needs to also be at the landscape level. And so this is a really exciting kind of program area that we're developing, and we have these learning groups and coordinating groups starting to happen all over the state, and some even are just about to emerge, I think, out of some work we're doing in South Kohala as well. So it's relevant to this group and to the Coastal Partnership. And now I wanted to point out on the next slide that the processes that we see for the Firewise communities and our residents and homeowners is also really similar to what we are doing and seeing is working on the land manager and large landowner side of things, which is that in both cases, we have information available that's really specific to the concerns and priorities of each kind of group and what they're interested in and what's relevant. And then we start off with the learning part, but then we start to come together to take action within these really diverse groups of people who are really similarly motivated, and people and entities and all sorts of, you know, folks are coming together to continue to learn together, to support each other with like peer learning and project coordination, and also to design and implement projects together and to help each other out in individual stuff. So Hawaii Wildfire is hosting several versions of these across the state. The Firewise program is the best that we have going on for a residential program. And then we have these other kind of action hubs coming together on the land management side. And then we're adding in that best available science that's being produced by our research partners and by Clay, Triarnict, and UH, and through the Pacific Fire Exchange. And it's all starting to weave together into this collective collaborative action that's also able to be place-based and make sense and be different across space and across parties. But in the end, everybody is really learning their role and figuring out how to do stuff collaboratively. So if you're not already a part of something like this, we invite you to get involved or start something up, something similar up for your purpose or place. And if there's a way for us to help, we're happy to chat and figure out how to support your desire to do some collaborative work. And for those of you who are joining or who are partners in the South Kohala Coastal Partnership, it looks like we're just going to start moving forward on a collaborative fuels management group for the greater Kauai area. So you can stay tuned for that in the coming month or two. And then I think that might be it, Nani. So yes. So we got through it all, but we shared a lot and we put together all these slides because we were trying to really cover a lot in a short time. So I have some slides here that are our key takeaways. And so here we are. If you don't remember much else, remember this, that people are starting fires. And so we need to work with people toward awareness and preparedness in all areas, but especially South Kohala, of course. The next is that fire can only travel where there's fuel. So the other thing we need to do is make sure we're managing our fuel, meaning vegetation, since firefighting is the last line of defense. It really needs to start with people and vegetation. And really working together is having a big impact. And so we have lots of resources and opportunities and existing infrastructure you can use as you start participating in getting more fire ready. And then if you want to join the effort and get this information out so that it becomes common knowledge instead of people not knowing that much about fire or even that we have a fire issue, I put together these key talking points because they seem to be changing the game with folks who are new to fire. But just that idea that it takes efforts in a lot of different sectors to achieve wildfire safety, that firefighting is the last line of defense, that there's a role for everyone to play. And at Hawaii Wildfire, we've come up with like a catchphrase to capture all of that, which is know fire, know your role, and do your part. And you'll notice that the no fire is like, no, we don't want any fire, but also we have to know and understand that we have fire and how it works and what to do. So it's a little play on words or spelling or something there. But anyway, no fire, know your role, do your part. And then your go-tos for education and for some more information and programs are these. It's the Ready, Set, Go action guide, Hawaii version, the Wildfire and Drought Lookout, which is our all partners came together to come up with simple messaging, and the Firewise program, Hawaii chapter for community-based action. And then also we have these local action and learning groups that are popping up all over and making a big difference. And those are really for like fuels management and action planning, multi-stakeholder kind of collaborative projects. And Hawaii Wildfire is hosting those. So let us know if you have an interest in being involved. And with that, the presentation is over. And we just wanted to make sure before we move on to Q&A, we wanted to thank the South Kohala Coastal Partnership and also Blair for giving us the time and space to provide all this information at once and to even have 2 of the speaker series this time be related to fire. We really want to highlight the issue. As you know, we've had some historic fires in the last year, and we don't really see the risk going down. So we're thankful that everybody showed up today to talk about this. And yeah, it seems like we're all on board to keep Hawaii's people and places safe from fire. So thanks again for attending. And if you guys have questions, I'm happy to answer, and maybe Nani can help as well.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Excellent presentation. I really enjoyed it and learned a lot. I don't see any questions in the chat. We can open it up to questions or discussion. Feel free to use the raise your hand icon, come off of, turn your camera on. Questions, comment. You might have just been so thorough, Elizabeth. Oh, we see Francine has a question. Go ahead, Francine.
Hi, thank you. Great presentation. A question I had, I do stuff with emergency preparedness, and I was just wondering if you were able to connect when Hawaii County's Civil Defense Agency was doing its multi-hazard mitigation plan. They rate the likely hazards, they assess and rate the hazards, and wildfire came out as the highest ranked, which would be a combination of the most likely and having the most damaging impact. Mm-hmm. Were you able to get involved in that when they did that hazard mitigation study?
Yeah, you know, we weren't directly involved, but we have carried out the hazard assessments for the state and determined the communities at risk from wildfire state map. That's in partnership with the state and Forestry and Wildlife, but that data that then does get shared with all the counties. So at that risk assessment level, I'm not sure which of ours they used and what they did on their own, but certainly we're all working together to assess the risk and to track it and to get it into all of our plans. So those maps are being updated actually as we speak, which is exciting too, so that it's as up to date as possible.
I don't think they have the Ready, Set, Go document on the County of Hawaii Civil Defense Agency website for one of the links to, you know, really useful documents and current documents. So if there's a way you could get that to them up there.
Oh yeah, certainly. They're strong partners of ours, and if we just need to get it on their website, we can do that for sure. But thank you for saying that, because we'll follow up. Oh, nice question, Melissa. I see in the chat, Melissa has asked how the wildfire pre-planning actions in South Kohala differ from other leeward areas in other places that we've worked. And I would say in South Kohala, we have something novel that we are able to work on, which is we are actually putting together a fire management plan that does include the entire timeline of pre, during, and after fire. And it does include all the categories that we went through today. So there's the goals for communities, the goals on the landscape, and the goals for optimizing firefighting are all included. And they're all of what we need to do with each group is included on the entire timeline, pre, during, and after. And I don't know of any other plans that are so comprehensive like that. But we were inspired by some work in West Maui where we did some pre-fire readiness for after fire recovery. And that work with those partners in West Maui really informed us and let us learn a lot that we're now applying to this new effort in South Kohala. Oh, Shelley, thank you. Agreed. She said that the plan sounds like a model for the county and state. We're working really hard to make it solid and usable and to provide a really good framework. And if we are able to see that this is useful, I think the idea would be that we will do this kind of planning elsewhere as well. Does anyone else have any questions? And we're always available. I think maybe we can stick our, the last slide I think we didn't get to was Nani and my email address. And you can get to us by just emailing us at directors@hawaiiwildfire.org. I stuck it in there.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have any other questions for Elizabeth and Nani? I really think your presentation was so thorough and informative that everyone is just completely up to date on wildfire in Hawaii now.
We hope so. I think the goal is for everybody to be able to share this information, because we still arrive at places where people are like, wildfire is really a thing here. So we're really trying to move beyond that and sort of catch our awareness up with the reality, and then start to also catch our actions up with it. In other places where fire is so known, it's second nature that people are aware and choosing their activities accordingly. And we're not quite there yet in Hawaii. So we're trying to get there. So the more people that share this and know, the better. So I'm so glad everyone's here today.
You know, Elizabeth, I actually have kind of a question. I remember participating in one of your guys' webinars that was specifically for homeowners and what they could do around their house. I remember a few things like keeping the fuel load, like having like a barrier around your home that is not going to exacerbate the fire.
Yeah, do you want me to cover some of that right now? I mean, I think for just anyone living in a a house, home, apartment building, anything really. What we recommend is to start literally inside your house with the people you live with and have an emergency plan. And if you can think about like then moving outward from there, there are a lot of actions you can take. So once you make and practice an emergency plan, ultimately that's really the most important. Have your go bag, have your medicines and your glasses and your people already and all of that sort of stuff. But next to that is the home itself. You can really do a lot to safeguard against an ember coming in and igniting if you've taken measures around your home. So the first thing is like anytime you're remodeling or doing anything, you can replace combustible materials with non-combustible materials. That's like changing your wood fence to a rock wall, etc. Make sure your roof is Class A roofing, it's not combustible. But even just some easy things you can do, like cleaning out your rain gutters, making sure that, because you're thinking about if an ember lands in a big leaf pile, it can ignite there and then the flames can get up under your eaves, etc. So it's thinking through all the places around your home that might have any burnable leaf debris or other materials and like cleaning it up. And so sweeping all around your home. Some people choose to put gravel in the 0 to 5 foot range all around the home. Really managing, if you have vegetation, it's watered, it's trimmed, and all that leaf debris is cleared away. And ideally you wouldn't have, if you're gonna have any vegetation around the home, don't put it under your windows, clear that out because it's the weakest part of your structure. So if you imagine you have leaf debris on the ground, it catches fire, it preheats the bush above it, which then catches fire. All that heat actually can crack open your window. And then when the window breaks, the fire gets inside your house. And so the idea is like, get it away from the windows, clean up all that leaf litter underneath, sweep, sweep, sweep. And also even just putting up like a non-combustible screen around your lanai and around the underneath of your house. If you're on post and pier, that prevents embers from getting under there and then finding something to smolder, ignite, and start to burn your house from underneath. So those are just some examples. And the Ready, Set, Go, literally the centerfold is you open it up and it's a house and it has, probably like 50 or 80 different points of recommended actions around the home that you can take. So I just touched on a few of them, but if you went and did that today, you'd be already better off. But the other thing is just clean up the leaf debris, get rid of dead and dying vegetation, trim your trees up high so that the lowest branch is no shorter than 10 feet. And mow your lawn, because the idea is you wouldn't want your grass to then catch the low hanging branches and then the fire gets up in the treetops because the wind will carry that even faster. So there's all these tricks and tips, and they're all available in the resources that we pointed to, and they're all sort of proven effective. And then the more of them you do, the better it is. And in the end, it all just comes down to good housekeeping anyway. Mow your lawn, trim your trees, get rid of the dead stuff, sweep, sweep, sweep. It's not hard stuff. You can do it even this weekend, some of it. Yeah, so we want everybody to know that stuff and just have that be part of their regular chores or landscaping, or even if they hire landscapers, that they're asking their landscapers to clear it in those ways, because it gets everybody safer.
The only other thing do you guys have links to the resources you mentioned? We could drop them in the chat.
Yeah, I think we could get those. Do you want to help me grab those?
I can also send them out with the link
to the recording
once I upload it to the website.
Well, for starters, I put our website in the chat, and then we could get you all the direct links to send out for sure.
Perfect. Francine, did you have another question?
I do. In the Ready, Set, Go booklet, the Go Leave Early page talks about emergency supplies, and it uses the Red Cross recommendation of the 3-day supply of water. State of Hawaii talks about 14 days for emergency supplies, and people get confused. They ask me, well, so which is it? Do I have one 3-day supply? Because if it's a wildfire, I'm likely only going to be away for 3 days. Or if it's a major hurricane or earthquake, my home's going to be devastated and I'll be in a shelter and I need 14 days worth of stuff. You got any suggestions to clarify that?
The reason the Ready Set Go is it is what it has in it, is mostly because the entire island, please, I hope not, is not all going to burn at once, where we have no infrastructure, no barges coming in, nothing. I mean, typically there is water at the shelters. It's not that the whole island went down, or, you have water at a nearby neighborhood if you didn't have it, wherever you started out. So that's really, fire ends up being a little bit different in that a hurricane might wipe out the entire island's infrastructure, as opposed to a fire being more limited. And so that's the reason that's in there in the Ready, Set, Go, according to Red Cross. That's the fire version. It is tricky though in preparing for all hazards, because it's the same sort of thing. Like in fire, we can't tell people ahead of time where they're going to evacuate to, because it all depends on the wind that day and where the fire started, etc. Whereas if there's a tsunami, it's just like run uphill. And so it's tricky to prepare for all of our hazards in identical ways. And that's some of the nuance that gets challenging when you're making the recommendations, because they're all just slightly different than each other. But the go bag with the prescriptions is the same. The make sure, does your neighbor have a plan? Are they elderly? Are they mobility challenged? Do you need to make sure that you're helping them? Some of those things are still the same. And so I guess we just are relying on people to understand what's the same and what might be a little bit different. Oh, thank you, Nani. And Melissa. So we have lots of links in the chat now. Thank you both.
Yeah, thank you. I've saved those for later. Any departing thoughts, burning questions? Okay, well, I can hang on for a couple minutes, but other than that, I think we can wrap it up. Thank you, Elizabeth and Nani, so much. Your presentation was excellent and extremely informative and very well presented. Thank you. Thank you for participating in the speaker series. And thank you guys for attending and actively participating. Excellent questions. So I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day. Like I said, I'll hang out for a couple more minutes. And other than that, thank you for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having us. And thank you everybody for joining.